Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we're continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and the proxy forces of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the Ukraine. Now, we continue to hear about the authorization for the release of low observable, heavy missile systems to be used against targets deep inside the Russian Federation. Now, look, these, again, as I've talked about before, are U.S. and European designed and manufactured missile systems that will be provided the targeting data by United States and Western European satellite systems to target Russian targets of opportunity throughout the Western Russian Federation. Now, why is this happening? Why is the United Kingdom, why is the United States authorizing, again, this release of which are essentially strategic weapon systems? These weapon systems, the Storm Shadow, in particular the JASM, are deep penetration strike weapons designed to hit Russian factories, air facilities, military bases, command and control centers deep inside of Russia. So why is this happening? Well, again, this grinding war that the Russians continue to prosecute against the NATO proxy forces of the regime of Volodymyr Zelensky is breaking the back of the Ukrainian military. Now, look, I've rephrased some things recently, especially just in this episode, in terms of these proxy forces, because look, this is what they are. Okay? The Ukrainian military would not exist right now if it wasn't for the direct support of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the United States. There are U.S. and NATO intelligence and special operations forces currently operating in Western Ukraine. We continue to see thousands, tens of thousands of Ukrainian troops being transported out of locations in the Ukraine, transported to locations in Western Europe, the United Kingdom, bases throughout the United States, trained and then sent back to fight against Russian forces. And in many cases, there are U.S. and Western European contract forces, mercenaries, whatever you want to call them, operating with these Ukrainian military units. These contractors are financed and supported directly by the United States, by the intelligence agencies of the United States and MI6 of the United Kingdom, to continue to facilitate and help the Ukrainians fight the Russians. Now, that has not been working. This grinding war by the Russians, again, are breaking the back of the Ukrainian military. So again, as I've talked about before, desperate times call for desperate measures. That's exactly what we're seeing. If we zoom in again, we look at the last few days, we're looking at a couple of different locations. We are looking at Volodar, this locale here. Let's kind of back up and look what has happened, which is in the last few days. Again, this is the, I would say, the most southwestern portion of the Donbass offensive. This is part of the Donbass offensive. Obviously, some of the most heaviest fighting is also taking place to the north. But again, let's fast forward this and see exactly what is and has been happening. So you can see here clearly that especially near Vuhledar, the main road that was supplying this fortified locale has been severed. The only real way in is directly by the north, and the Russians have this area covered by multiple launch rocket systems, Lancet drones, what have you. Again, also up towards the offensive, taking the primary Donbass offensive that's taking place in the direction towards Prokrovsk. Again, you can kind of see this grinding war of attrition that, while is making gains on the ground, and we're kind of going back in time now. We'll fast forward where you, the viewer, can see exactly what's happening. While it's not taking over just massive areas of territory, the important thing that it is doing, the main objective, is depleting the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian army right now is just in dire straits. Things are incredibly bad for the Ukrainian military. That is why they're discussing using these long-range, low-observable missiles against targets deep inside of Russia. This is kind of the last attempt to try and make Russia stop this ongoing Donbass offensive by threatening targets deep inside the Russian Federation. Now, will it work? Will it work? Will these strikes by ATACMS and JASMs and Storm Shadows, will it be effective enough once it happens to make the Russian offensive operations in the Donbass cease? Well, probably not. We know that the Russians have relocated a lot of its air assets, a lot of its Su-35s, its backfire bombers, its Su-34s, its Su-25s, Su-24s have been relocated and are being constantly moved, and it's made it very difficult for the Ukrainians to locate these aircraft, which are causing tremendous amounts of casualties using those guided GLONASS bombs. These very large guided bombs, essentially GPS guided bombs, that have been retrofitted for glide purposes. It extends their range, and they're continuing to be used. Again, this isn't necessarily a war to seize control of large amounts of territory. It's going to happen organically because of the loss of manpower and equipment by the Ukrainian military. The Russians continue to go after arms depots. They continue to go after stockpiles deep inside of Ukraine, and it is just wearing the Ukrainians down. And that's why we're seeing this desperation start to set in, because the Ukrainian military command, the NATO high command, fully understands that the Ukrainians cannot possibly continue this war for another year to 2 years. But the Russians have every intent to continue this conflict until they break the back of the Ukrainian military. The Russians are very confident that if this type of war continues, and look, you're dealing with a very large country in the Russian Federation. You're dealing with a country that has a large pool of manpower, 145 million people. It has the full backing right now. The Russians have the full backing of Iran, North Korea, which is essentially just a massive weapons producing state in terms of munitions, and I think that's finally starting to be fully understood of just the manufacturing capacity of North Korea in terms of weapon systems. They don't produce much of anything else, but they definitely have the ability to produce massive amounts of artillery in multiple launch rocket systems and short-range ballistic missile systems. The Iranians have proven to be very capable as well in terms of being able to produce these weapon systems and then directly support the Russians. At the same time, worst case scenario is happening right now on the political front, in which the Russians are now probably directly helping the Iranians with their nuclear weapons program. So again, and then the Chinese. I haven't even mentioned the Chinese, which is a whole other animal in terms of technology and capability that is also directly helping the Russians as well. And as I've talked about, this runaway train, where we will, in all probability, eventually see, unfortunately, an alliance of certain Western European nation states, the United States, and certain Asian allies enter into probably what's going to be the largest conflict in human history. And that's going to be those groups of nation states against Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and in all probability, Venezuela and Cuba will also be brought into this conflict at some point. This is the path that we're currently on, especially if the United States and its Western European allies, specifically the United Kingdom and France, start to use these long-range missile systems against targets deep inside of Russia. The Russians are going to respond. The Russians are saying they're going to respond. Now, look, I get the whole concept of, well, it's just a fake red line, right? Well, Vladimir Putin says this is his red line, and that red line gets pushed back incrementally. Look, eventually when you push a group of individuals or a nation state against the wall, they will respond. They will respond. And what is that response going to be? Look, there's a lot of targets and a lot of different ways that the Russians can go after NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization have put themselves in an incredibly precarious situation, especially by granting Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Look, the Baltic states are being incredibly bold in both statements and how they are supporting the Ukrainians. If this becomes an open, hot conflict, the Russians are going to destroy the Baltic states. That is going to happen. Now, the Baltics have been emboldened by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, believing that the United States and the United Kingdom and NATO is going to come to the aid of the Baltic states in the event of war. I don't know that. We don't know that. Some may come to their assistance, but if you ask the average American, once their head is pulled out of their ass and they quit absorbing all this insane propaganda from the mainstream media, and the average American is told, hey, are you willing to sacrifice your sons and daughters on a scale that has been unprecedented? Are you willing to do that to support Estonia? Look, most Americans don't even know where Estonia is. Most Americans don't even know Estonia is a nation state. And you're going to tell me that the average American is going to sacrifice their most cherished thing on this planet, which is their kids, for Estonia and the Ukraine? No. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be allowed. And therein lies the problem for the Baltics. They are putting themselves, by being emboldened, by being part of this alliance in which they believe is going to come to their aid in the event that the Russians move in and take control of Estonia. Look, if the Russians seize control of Estonia, and believe me, they can, and they may eventually. If active hostilities start between the Russians and NATO, it's in the best interest of the Russian Federation to lop off that NATO capability in the Baltics and join up with Russian forces in Kaliningrad. It just makes military sense. So then what? If you have 100,000 Russian troops that have moved into the Baltics, what's next? Is the United States going to move forces into Poland and then attack Kaliningrad? Are they going to launch maneuver operations against the Russian Federation in Belarus and Lithuania? You think that's going to happen? Are we willing to go there? Then quite possibly see a release of tactical nuclear weapons. And then we know what happens after that. Will you answer that question? You, the viewer. Comment in the comment section. As always, thanks for joining us. More to come. Have a good day.